How's it going, fellas and the files? This is Dominic from Film Overload, the channel where we talk about movies, pop culture, and everything in between. And I am back with another rankings video, and as you could probably tell by the thumbnail, today we're ranking Star Wars. I thought this would be kind of a fun franchise to rank. I love Star Wars, well, most of Star Wars, and I just wanted to rank this great franchise from my least favorite to my favorite. There's just so much to dive into when it comes to Star Wars. There's so many great stories and characters, and just celebrating just the unbelievable franchise that George Lucas created is just always fun to talk about, always fun to watch, over and over again on Blu-ray or Disney Plus or whatever it is. So I'm going to be ranking all of the Star Wars films from my least favorite to my favorite. And as always, if my list doesn't look like your list, well, that's okay, because that's the beautiful part about film is that it's all subjective. We all have our various different tastes and styles that we like, and that's okay. That, once again, that's just the beauty of film itself. So without further ado, let's move on to the video. Alright, once again, we are in our trusty tier list maker website where you can just find anything and everything that you can make into a tier list, and I just happened to find a template of every single theatrical Star Wars movie ever released, and we're going to start this off with the not so great Star Wars films. And to kick off this list, if you've not seen my top 10 worst movies ever video, which will be probably in the description down below or somewhere in these notes up here somewhere, we're going to start off with a movie that, in my opinion, ultimately ruined the entirety of the Star Wars franchise, and that is Star Wars Episode 8, The Last Jedi. Like I say in my top 10 worst movie video, this film has so much wrong with it, and if I go into everything that's wrong with this film, this video will literally be like an hour and a half, and I don't want to make an hour and a half video, but the quick rundown is they destroyed Luke's character, they demoted characters that should have been promoted. Rey is just once again mindless, has no training whatsoever. She can magically lift 6 tons of rocks on crates or whatever planet that was. Princess Leia just... yeah, Supreme Leader Snoke was a complete joke of a character. Rian Johnson's writing and directing was just absolutely horrific in this movie. There's so much wrong in this movie, and in my opinion, destroys the entirety of what made Star Wars so beautiful and so special. And once again, if I got into everything wrong with this film, it would be like a 2-hour long video, and I really don't want to make that long of a video. But in my opinion, Star Wars Episode 8, The Last Jedi, is the worst Star Wars movie that they have ever made. At number 11, we have the film that was released right after Star Wars Episode 8, and that is Star Wars Episode 9, The Rise of Skywalker. I would much rather watch The Rise of Skywalker over The Last Jedi, but that's not really saying much because Episode 9 almost has the same amount of problems as Episode 8 did. Once again, they just extended Princess Leia's arc, which should have died with Carrie Fisher, rest in peace. Leia was pointless in the movie. Rey, once again, just another mindless character. They brought back Palpatine for no reason. Technically, the Palpatine bloodline won because Rey somehow is a Palpatine, and somewhere in there, Palpatine had a son who then got freaky with a... what? It's a long mess of problems. More problems with Finn's character, more problems with Poe's character. The entire plot of the film is just, I mean, you've all seen the memes. Somehow Palpatine returned, and just the way this movie ended the Skywalker saga was a disaster. It was an abysmal disaster, and it's so tragic because the sequel trilogy could have been absolutely amazing, and unfortunately, like we've been saying for years, they had absolutely no plan with this franchise whatsoever. They were simply in it to make a quick buck, and it showed, because the sequel trilogy, in my opinion, is just a disaster. And episode 8 and episode 9 did not help its cause at all, making it my number 11 on the Star Wars tier list. All right, moving on to our very first spin-off film to finally make it onto the tier list. And I am going to put on there at number 10, Solo, A Star Wars Story. Look, this film had no business being made at all. Ron Howard tried his best to make something special, and it just felt like a sci-fi film. If you didn't attach the word Star Wars to this project, I would have actually said, okay, that's not a bad sci-fi film. But unfortunately, it was a origin story about a character we kind of already knew, and we didn't need to know. That was kind of the cool part about Han Solo, was that we didn't know his origins. He was just this cool, swaggy smuggler who just kind of, traveled the galaxy and just picked up, the occasional bounty here and there, and this film, again, did not need to be made at all. It went through production hell. So many directors, so many writers. I think Alden Ehrenreich, he tried his best. I really don't think he was the right choice for Han Solo. He tried, but I just think there was other people that could have brought more to the role. Emilia Clarke was fine in it. Paul Bettany was fine in it. Donald Glover, in my opinion, stole the entire film. I thought he was the best part of the film. But they did things to Lando's character that was just absolutely unforgivable. Just things that just didn't really make sense at all. And it just didn't feel like a Star Wars film. And it did not make a lot of money because for some reason Disney decided to release this film 2 weeks after Avengers Infinity War's release, which ultimately killed this movie's box office because you had the height of Infinity War, and then you released Solo 2 weeks later or 3 weeks later, whatever it was, and that's why it did not make that much money at all. And and there were some hiccups here and there. Like, the story was just super all over the place. The villains were boring. The way Han Solo got his name.
I don't have people. I'm alone.
Solo.
What? What? What the
Oh my gosh. It was so cringy and so bad. This movie is not good at all, but I would much rather watch that than episode 9 or episode 8. But Solo, A Star Wars Story will land on my number 10 on the Star Wars tier list. Alright, as you can see here, I had to add another tier to the list because I completely forgot about how to structure my tier list. Yes, I'm not very organized when it comes to these ranking videos, so please bear with me, but I had to add another tier to the list. But to round out the bad portion of this tier list, we have to go to the very first sequel they ever made, and that is Star Wars Episode 7, The Force Awakens. I can very vividly remember when this movie came out. I was a sophomore in high school, and the hype was insane. The trailer dropped, and the trailer just hooked everyone. People were like, yes, Star Wars is back, and oh my gosh, was it ever. I remember going to my local cinema opening night. There was people dressed up as Jedi and stormtroopers, and there was a couple Anakins and Obi-Wans in there. And when I first saw this film, this was like, okay, that was fun. It wasn't great, but it was fun. And I will admit, The Force Awakens is the only sequel film that I can actually watch and not cringe the entire time through it. Although, unfortunately, because of the movies that follow it, I have to put it down here because The Force Awakens loses its value because of the two films that follow it. Yes, it introduces Rey, it introduces Finn and Poe and Kylo Ren. We get to see the Star Wars universe 30 years after Return of the Jedi, and there's a new group called the First Order, and we get introduced to them. We get introduced to, Kylo Ren's fascination for his grandfather. We see Han and Leia reunite and interact with the new characters. There's a lot of promise in The Force Awakens. There is a ton of promise in The Force Awakens, and unfortunately, it just kind of drops the ball on that potential that it had. This film had so much potential to be just something so special. This film had the opportunity to be so special and to set up the next trilogy of films in a fantastic way, but unfortunately, it just kind of drops the ball. And again, it loses its value because of the two films that follow it. It's a fun ride, don't get me wrong. But again, just the inconsistent nature of this film, plus the sequels that follow it, really demote this film's value. And that is why I have to put it on the number 9 spot in the tier list. All right, guys, we have made our way to the meh portion of this tier list. And there are 2 films in the meh part of the tier list. And coming in at number 8 on the tier list, we have a film that I think gets way too much hate. Yes, it is not great, but I think it gets too much hate, and that is Star Wars: The Clone Wars film. Is it good? No. Is it bad? No. Again, there is some promising elements to this film. Once again, we get to see Anakin and Obi-Wan as they try and navigate their way through the Clone Wars. We get the introduction of Ahsoka Tano, who becomes a very prominent character in the Star Wars universe. We get to see Anakin take Ahsoka under his wing and really learn himself how to be a master to a younger apprentice. And we really get to see the birth of Anakin and Ahsoka's relationship in this film. And this film ultimately kicks off, in my opinion, one of the greatest animated series ever made, which is the Star Wars: The Clone Wars series, which I absolutely love with all my heart. I grew up with that show every single Fridays at 7 o'clock, Cartoon Network. That was me. I was that kid. And I just love that show so much. But the film, yes, the film is not great. There are definitely some hiccups in this film, but it's just the nostalgia for me, I think, is the reason why I can't put it any lower than this. I just think there is too much potential in this movie. Again, it's not great, and there are definitely some hiccups in this film, but I don't think it's that bad in my opinion. Yes, the story does jump everywhere. The characters are kind of all over the place, but I think it was because they were trying to set up this television series afterwards, and the film was kind of like the beginning of what was going to come eventually. So, in my opinion, the Clone Wars are not that bad. The movie is not that bad, and that is why I have to put it in the meh part of the tier list, and that's ultimately my number 8 as well. Coming in at number 7, we have our first prequel on this list, and coming in at number 7, we have a film that is notorious for being called the worst prequel, and I do agree about it being the worst prequel, but I don't think it's necessarily that bad, and that is Star Wars Episode 2, Attack of the Clones. Yes. Is it sappy? Yes. Is it messy? Yes. Is the love story too much? Absolutely. Do we like sand?
I don't like sand. It's coarse and rough and irritating, and it gets everywhere.
Attack of the Clones, I think, was supposed to be a bigger film in the prequel era, and unfortunately, I think the love story overshadows what George, I think, was going for. Yes, George has mentioned numerous times that the love story was the heart and soul of this film, but I think the attention and the main story points of this film are there. Unfortunately, the main story points get overshadowed by Anakin and Padme's romance. In my opinion, the film should have stayed focused on the development of the clone army on Kamino, which ultimately would lead to the battle on Geonosis. But like the Clone Wars movie, Attack of the Clones really has some interesting things in it. For example, the chemistry between Ewan McGregor and Hayden Christensen, I think, is great. I love the fact that Obi-Wan has to kind of reel Anakin back into reality, because he can tell that Anakin is starting to kind of lean towards his feelings towards Padme over his Jedi responsibilities. And this is where we kind of see our first kind of head-on clash between Anakin and Obi-Wan, and kind of a teaser for the film that follows it. I really liked their chemistry. I loved the Kamino stuff. I loved the side plot with Obi-Wan, discovering everything that's going on Kamino. The Jango Fett stuff is really fun. Yes, the romance totally overtakes all of the good stuff. But we get introduced to characters like Sam Wessel. A really fun bounty hunter chase through the streets, the skies of Coruscant. It's just the great battle on Geonosis. That is my favorite part of the entire film, is that incredible battle sequence on Geonosis. I love that sequence so much. It's so much fun seeing, the Jedi against like the droids. I absolutely love that. The humor is a little bit too much, in my opinion, in this film. I really wish they would have toned down that kind of like that snarky, and yes, George has stated numerous times he was never a big writer of dialogue, and it shows especially in the prequels. But George's story was there, and in Attack of the Clones, his vision is there. Unfortunately, his vision was just kind of overshadowed, in my opinion, by too much of the romance between Anakin and Padme. So I can't really say this film is bad. It's not great, but it's not bad either, making it my last film on the meh portion of this tier list, and my number 7. When people ask me what's the perfect film trilogy, I used to say Star Wars, but over the years that has shifted to Lord of the Rings. And it used to be Star Wars, but after a rewatch of the original trilogy with a new pair of eyes, as I'm much older now since I first saw them, there's one film in the original trilogy that just seems out of place. This might be my hottest film take ever, but I have to do this because I think this one film takes away from the original trilogy being the perfect trilogy, and that is Star Wars Episode 6, Return of the Jedi. Yes, this film, it's good. It's good. There's a lot of good things. There is the rescue at Jabba's palace. There's the Great Pit of Carkoon. There's the rebels trying to figure out how to defeat the second Death Star. There is great character work. We get to physically see the Emperor for the first time. Vader's turn to the light. That iconic lightsaber duel between Luke and his father Vader. But until we get to the meat and potatoes that is that last half hour, we follow Princess Leia and a group of teddy bears for almost over an hour. Over an hour. The movie stalls and stalls and stalls and stalls until that last half an hour, 35 minutes. The film starts out blazing with Jabba's palace and the Great Pit of Carkoon. But then there is that really weird area of the film where it just feels like you're just wandering around Endor for 45 minutes, an hour. Princess Leia is walking around with Wicket for like an hour, and it's not fun, and it just feels like the film just didn't know what to do with that middle portion of the film. And don't get me wrong, there are story elements and very important story elements that are sprinkled in the middle of this film, but it just felt like they tried to set up the Ewoks too much. And speaking of the Ewoks, you mean to tell me that a group of 2-foot-tall teddy bears defeats the most technologically advanced army in the galaxy with sticks and stones and ropes?
What?
Now, I am not saying this film is bad by any means. There is some brilliant storytelling in this film. I just wish it was as impactful as A New Hope and Empire Strikes Back, because A New Hope is perfect. Empire Strikes Back doubles down on the perfection. And for some reason, Return of the Jedi just felt somewhat out of place. I don't know what it is about that film, but it just didn't grab me the way the other two did. Again, I'm not saying it's a bad film. It's just, I would say, an overrated film slightly. I enjoy the film for what it is. I really do. And I think it ends the universe very, very well, because in my opinion, Star Wars ends with Episode 6 and the sequels don't exist. But I thought this film just didn't have that energy that the other two have, making it my number 6 on this tier list and the beginning of the solid portion of the tier list. The last film on the solid portion of this tier list is a film that I think is severely overlooked in the Star Wars canon, and that is Star Wars Episode 1, The Phantom Menace. Look, yes, push Jar Jar Binks aside, and if you can do that, this film is actually not that bad. In fact, this film is a lot of fun. We get the introduction to Qui-Gon Jinn and Obi-Wan Kenobi. Well, not officially, but a younger version of Obi-Wan Kenobi. We get our first look at Qui-Gon and Obi-Wan when he's younger. We get the introduction of Padme Amidala. We get 9-year-old Anakin Skywalker. We understand that the Trade Federation and the blockade and that entire storyline, their ship crashes on Tatooine. They meet Anakin. We get the amazing pod racing, which in my opinion is a top 10 scene in Star Wars history. Qui-Gon senses something in Anakin that he's never sensed in a child or anyone before, thanks to the midichlorians count. We get the introduction of Darth Maul. We see kind of these hints of Palpatine and him planting his idea, his long-term idea, to overtake the Senate and eventually reveal himself as the Emperor. And there's a lot of good things in this. The music is incredible. Duel of the Fates is arguably one of the best, if not the best, Star Wars music ever. The Duel of the Fates and that fantastic fight sequence at the very end of the film between Qui-Gon, Obi-Wan, and Darth Maul is outstanding. This movie is good. Unfortunately, it gets bogged down and played down because, let's be honest, people don't like Jar Jar Binks, and that's okay. I don't like Jar Jar Binks very much. Is he funny? Yes. Is he annoying? Yes. But people did not like the combination at all. And so because of him, mainly, this film gets played down a lot. But I personally believe this film is severely overlooked. It is so much fun. It is so much fun to watch. And I believe this film is the most underrated film in the entire Star Wars canon. So, in my opinion, Star Wars Episode 1, The Phantom Menace, is the very last movie on my solid portion of this tier list and my number 5 Star Wars film overall. Moving on to the great portion of this tier list, and there is only one film in this portion of the tier list, and this film, in my opinion, once again, is severely overlooked. This is a film that I was actually really surprised by when it first came out, and it made me realize that you can tell a very gripping and very character-driven Star Wars film without Jedi being the main focus, and that is Rogue One, a Star Wars story. Yes, on a lot of people's list, this film is not very high. I personally think it is fantastic. It reminded me of like a World War II film set in the Star Wars universe, and that to me was just really, really, really cool. It was very interesting not having the main characters be Jedi. It's the only film, well, aside from Solo, it's one of only 2 Star Wars films that does not have Jedi at the main focus, and I find those types of stories very fascinating, and I thought Rogue One really knocked that kind of atmosphere out of the park. Yes, do the main characters die at the end? Yes, we all saw that coming. But, very solid characters. I think Jyn Erso is a pretty solid protagonist. Cassian Andor was hit or miss for me. I loved Chirrut Îmwe. I thought Donnie Yen killed that role. I really thought that Ben Mendelsohn was a great villain. This film plays to its strengths very, very well, and that is tight, compact, but really solid character work. A very driven narrative story. The story was very well done. Yes, we understand the story. Rogue One is literally the opening crawl for A New Hope. But this film really, really worked for me. I really liked it a lot. And I think this film gets overlooked a lot in the Star Wars canon, but I really thought that Gareth Edwards really knocked this film out of the park. And come on, that last 15 minutes of that film with Vader in them, oh my gosh. That last shot with Vader and it perfectly like splicing into A New Hope, I thought was genius. I thought that ending is so, so good. And I don't know, I just really loved this film a lot. I know a lot of people didn't like this film. I personally love this film, and in my opinion, it is my 4th favorite Star Wars movie on this tier list. We have made it to the best portion of this tier list, and to kick off the best portion of this tier list, I have the best prequel film out of the 3, and that is Star Wars Episode 3, Revenge of the Sith. This film is jam-packed with emotions. Jam-packed with emotions. Is the dialogue great? No, not at all. But once again, like The Phantom Menace, like Attack of the Clones, George's vision is ever so present in this film. We finally see the corruption of Chancellor Palpatine. We finally get to see him revealed as the Emperor. We get to see that drama between Obi-Wan and Anakin finally boil over. We get to see Anakin being rejected by the Council, which ultimately sets him off onto his journey of darkness. We hear the lies that Palpatine tells Anakin, with, have you ever heard the tragedy of Darth Plagueis the Wise? The lies that he tells Anakin and instills into Anakin's mind to drive him overboard is brilliant. We get the side plot with Obi-Wan and General Grievous. We get the side plot that Padme is pregnant with Luke and Leia. And we see Anakin's slow descent into the dark side of the Force until it finally culminates on Mustafar, which, in my opinion, has the greatest lightsaber fight in Star Wars history. That Mustafar duel has so much emotion packed into it. You can just feel that these two men who were literally brothers at one point, being complete and total strangers now. And you can see the heartbreak on Ewan McGregor's face, on Obi-Wan's face, as he's fighting who he thought was his best friend. And it's one of those films that just, every time I watch it, it almost brings me to the point of tears, because it's so emotionally packed. You can feel the heaviness. You can feel the heaviness in this film. And it's so, so good and just so rich. And I absolutely love that for those reasons. Episode 3 is, in my opinion, fantastic. It is one of my favorite Star Wars movies of all time and my number 3 on the Star Wars tier list. At number 2, we have the film that started it all back in 1977, May 25th, 1977, and that is Star Wars Episode 4, A New Hope. What this film did for cinema in general will never be duplicated again. Film before Star Wars was interesting. The late 60s into the early 70s was kind of a low point for the industry, and they were kind of running out of ideas from those past golden eras of Hollywood. And when this film dropped, it shattered the world. It blew the world's mind. And I can see why. Because it blew my mind the first time I saw this film. That the opening crawl, the Tantive 4 ship being chased by a massive Empire ship. For the first time, you go, wow, this ship is huge. You get the main core of the story. A message has to get to Ben Kenobi, and through C-3PO and R2-D2, there is no Star Wars without those two droids, because if it wasn't for them crash landing on Tatooine, we wouldn't have gotten to meet one of the greatest movie characters of all time, Luke Skywalker, played by a very young Mark Hamill. We get to meet Ben Kenobi. We get to see these two men and these two droids go on this adventure and meet Han Solo and Chewbacca in the Mos Eisley Cantina. We get to see just the very different styles of aliens. We get to see all these different worlds. We get to meet Carrie Fisher's Princess Leia for the first time. All of her witty dialogue, which made her an iconic female staple in the Star Wars universe and just in movies in general. Mark Hamill, Harrison Ford, and Carrie Fisher, their chemistry is unmatched. It is incredible. We get to see the run back between Vader and Obi-Wan. We get to see Luke be in a X-Wing and destroy the first Death Star. And the film is perfect. Star Wars Episode 4 is perfect. It is so perfect. You can watch that movie all day and you could never be bored with it. Every time you watch it, you discover something new, and I absolutely love that about this film. And of course, John Williams' iconic soundtrack for that film. John Williams' work in Star Wars is masterful. You're never going to replicate it, ever. Every single piece of music that John Williams wrote for this film is perfection. And I just absolutely love it. I love Star Wars Episode 4. It is my second favorite film in the Star Wars universe. It is one of my top 50 favorite films of all time, and it lands at number 2 on my Star Wars tier list. And finally, the obvious number 1 in my opinion is Star Wars Episode 5, The Empire Strikes Back. This is the greatest sequel in cinema history. Yes, it's better than The Two Towers. Yes, it's better than The Godfather Part 2. Yes, it is better than Back to the Future Part 2. Yes, it is better than Before Sunset. This film is the greatest sequel of all time. The amount of emotion in this film, we get to see Luke take his real first steps into becoming a Jedi. We get to see him train with Yoda on Dagobah. And John Williams' beautiful theme plays through the foggy, eerie, sogginess of Dagobah. We get to see Han and Leia's relationship flourish. We get to see Cloud City for the first time. us meeting Lando, him betraying his friend to the Empire. We get to see Vader fight Luke Skywalker on Cloud City, and the greatest cinema reveal of all time of Vader being Luke's father, which back in the day blew everyone's minds. And once again, just carried by John Williams' beautiful, beautiful music and Irvin Kershner's perfect direction. The Empire Strikes Back is, in my opinion, one of the greatest films ever made. It's in my top 15 films of all time. I love this film with a passion. I love the character work. I love how we get to see the emotions come out of the characters. We get to see these three-dimensional characters for the first time. A New Hope introduced these three characters to us, but Episode 5 deconstructed all three of them and really brought out what they're all about. And I just loved that. And so Empire Strikes Back rounds out my Star Wars tier list. It's my favorite Star Wars movie of all time, and once again, in my top 15 as well. Star Wars has changed my perspective on not only storytelling, but in life in general. I've loved it ever since I was a little kid, and really inspired me to write my own stories as well. And guys, if you love Star Wars as much as I do, leave your rankings in the comments down below. And if you're new here and want to see more forms of this content, hit that like button. Also, hit subscribe while you're at it and turn on the post notifications so that you guys can get notified every single time that I post a video. You can follow me on Letterboxd, which is right here. I post all of my movie reviews on Letterboxd, as it helps me keep track of movies that I have watched, movies that I haven't watched, and movies that I will watch. I think you guys would benefit greatly from this app and this website if you are indeed lovers of cinema like myself. As always, guys, happy movie watching. Take care.